Very warm greetings, friends. Welcome, welcome. Thank you. We're here again, which is always just a bright celebration, honestly, to come together, to reflect on the Dharma, on the nature, on goodness, on our own goodness, on the goodness of others is such a special opportunity, and we keep choosing to connect to that, to our goodness and others' goodness. And this is just such a vibrant, beautiful, loving, wonderful thing we can do with our time, with each other. And so thanks for doing that. Thanks for making the time and showing up and kind of being interested and activating this goodness, this brightness that we all have. And so as we always begin these reflections, our study and practice with the Dharma, we kind of connect to this brightness that we share. And like Rinpoche's, as they always say, that begins with joy and appreciation or renunciation mind. It's gratitude, like a genuine gratitude for all the amazing things we have going for us. And so we don't have to keep it too far out. We can just keep it really close. The body I have that's working, the food that I have in my stomach, the language I speak that I didn't have to create, the air that I breathe that's not killing me when I breathe it. There's so many things. Of course, the living thread of Dharma that's still available, the teachings that have been preserved, the mom and dad and friends that cared for us when we were little babies, that without them we wouldn't be able to be here right now. We can kind of bring up this list if it helps in our mind, or also just kind of relax and feel what it feels like to just be here, to sit, feet on the ground, kind of have that, just a little bit more of this shining appreciation instead of emphasizing what's off, what's wrong, what's crooked, what's whatever, uncomfortable, kind of highlight instead what's really lovely. And that's just how we're turning our mind to what is a lovely part of my experience now. And so that's the first part of poising our mind for it to shine out its own goodness, the loveliness of what's outside and what's inside. And then secondly, to emphasize more what's good outside. This special quality we all have, this goodness. In Buddhism, they call it Buddha nature. But there's this good heart. So to really remember that. I have a good heart, you have a good heart. We have really good heart, this beautiful, bright intelligence we have. And to kind of, while we have this intelligence, we also go through so many challenges and ups and downs. And we really know this, the tension. The body tension, mind tension, all these tensions. So none of us want that. We all want to be happy. So why are we doing this? Why do we study the Dharma? Why are we reflecting on it? Why are we trying to put it into practice and have our minds brighten, have our hearts open? So all beings can connect to their own goodness, their own brightness, their own loveliness. So this Bodhichitta, heart mind of enlightenment, really kind of activate that. May this be of direct and immediate benefit for every single being to just fully actualize their own wonderful, boundless nature of wisdom and compassion, the Bodhichitta. And then thirdly, this pure perception, or Vajra pride, this clear seeing, when the mind isn't kind of so fixated, so tense, so frustrated, so kind of collapsed in on itself, that when it's not doing that, it's kind of relaxed, open, buoyant, fresh, vivid, connected, embodied. It's very present. It's very engaged. It's like sizzling with energy. And so there's a lot of ways to unpack this. But in general, we can call this like a divine mandala filled with divine beings. This is like a very harmonious set of conditions, and we're a part of that, each of us. So pure body, pure speech, pure mind, deity, mantra, dharmakaya. This kind of really bring up this courageous view that this goodness is everywhere, outside, inside, all around, in between. This is all goodness. So kind of rest in that instead of feeling like there's some big problem to solve, some big fire to put out, something wrong to right. Instead of that, just relax. And I'm saying this right to myself. Hey, Dragpa, just relax. This is good. Don't have to really change something. So with this joy, connect with others with a really genuine good heart. And just relax. This is already so good. And we just do that together for a moment. Thank you. So we have a brief little window of time to kind of reflect on the Dharma, and there's so many angles and ways we can unpack natural systems, our nature, our mind, what's outside, what's inside. So today I've kind of chosen a little theme. Like I do, it's helpful for me to kind of think of a little corner of the maze of reality and to kind of play in that space for a little while. So today's theme is holding one's feet to the fire by joyfully embracing voluntary simplicity. Holding one's own feet to the fire by joyfully embracing voluntary simplicity. So a lot lately I've been thinking about what is it to be a living, breathing being in the middle of a web of living, breathing things that come together in part to integrate and disintegrate. You know, just all the things of the gushy, messy, uncontrolled, flexing, living nature of being a human in a world that we can't control. And largely with a body that I can't control and a mind that I definitely seem to not be able to control. Jump, jump, jump. So I've been thinking about that a lot. And so holding one's own feet to the fire by joyfully embracing voluntary simplicity. So I decided on this topic, and then I was thinking, after I decided on this, a couple days ago, right afterwards, I just saw a video. And I just showed this to Lama Laia recently. And you might have seen it. The first Matrix movie. 1999, 24 years ago. Okay, there's a scene in this first Matrix movie. And it's the first time when Morpheus introduces Neo to the construct. This is a giant, boundless white space where all of a sudden Keanu Reeves' Neo pops up and Lawrence Fishburne Morpheus pops up, and they look like themselves, and it's this holding space where they could just put any program in there, and all of a sudden the white area, the white world system with these two, Neo and Morpheus, can be populated by anything they want. Nature, weapons, a city, a jump training program, anything. They're in the middle of a program, but they seem real to themselves and to each other. And they can populate this giant blank white space with anything they want. Maybe you remember the scene. I'll link to it if you're watching this video. Look below. Okay, 2 days ago, this became reality. Mark Zuckerberg put out the first interview in the metaverse. And what does it look like? A giant, boundless white space with Mark Zuckerberg standing in it and the interviewer, Lex Friedman, standing in it. And it's nearly indistinguishable from real life, from their bodies. And they're talking, moving, their lighting changes, the emotionality changes. So this scene from this Matrix movie, 1999, is now real. So we're 2 days into that. So you'll see. Maybe if you're older, not interested in this. If you're younger and you have a phone and you have some money to get some headset goggles within the year, you'll know this space a lot more than today. This is no longer science fiction. This is no longer a movie. So the question is, how am I going to populate that space? How are you going to populate that space? A giant, boundless, frameless, white space that doesn't follow the laws of physics, where you can show up in any way you want, where you can do anything you want, in any language you want, with whoever you want. So the topic is holding oneself to the fire, one's feet to the fire. And another way of looking at this, how do I hold myself accountable? Responsibility. We're entering a time where I can literally I can populate my world that I experience with anything I want, and it will seem real. So how do I hold myself accountable in that? This is a very interesting window that we're entering in. Because any living system that actually thrives over time, it has constraints. It has boundaries. It has membranes. It has things it can and cannot do. Living systems have to be in touch with each other. The water has to be in touch with the wind and the fire and the metal and the earth. And the beings have to be in touch with each other. And the food we eat goes through our bodies and it has to be in touch with our organs, and it transports and transforms and excretes and becomes the earth, and that becomes soil and a tree, which you take, the whole cycle of systems of interacting things that bind each other. It's not a giant open white room. These are lived, embodied systems that interact with each other. And we're about to enter a time where a lot of people's time is going to not be in that realm. You put on the headset, you put on the ear set, and you can populate a living, very seemingly real world with anything you want. So what does that do to us as bodhisattvas? How do I hold myself accountable in that kind of boundless space? This is boundless not in the sense of boundaries that fold into more boundaries. This is in the sense of I can do whatever I want without limit. This is not natural boundaried systems of interdependence. This is just ego clinging without limit. And what's going to happen when we have a shared space that we co-create? Like, where are the rules that you want to be a purple unicorn speaking Swahili, and I'm going to translate that into Spanish as a penguin that morphs into a cactus, that it's about to become anything. And it's going to be normal, the norm, the mainstream thing. If you think it's not true, go in public and see how many people don't have a smartphone glued to their face. This is only 14 years old. It looks odd to see someone in public that doesn't have a smartphone in their hand. It looks odd. So the point here isn't to point fingers and say, what are other people doing? But what am I going to do? How am I going to populate my world? How am I going to interact with my world? Because we're already doing that. It's just a less powerful framework in a way. We're already choosing to be in a place, in a time. Am I going to have kids or not? Am I going to work at this job or not? Am I going to respond with kindness or not? Am I going to wake up super stressed? Am I going to sit down and meditate? These are all choices, right? And the problem with embodied, embedded choices is that every choice involves grief, samsara, conditioned existence. Whatever we choose, we give up all the things we didn't choose. And there's a knowledge of that, of duality mind. It's like, I don't get all these other options. And it's like there's like a aching there. I can't do whatever I want. I have to actually choose something and be with it, and not be with all the other things. I have to choose a Ngondro practice, not just jump between practices, right? I have to choose a time and a place. I have to be an embedded, embodied, living, dynamic being in a world where I have to care for the world I'm in. And I have to show up on the terms of the world and the people in it that are around me that I'm affecting, that I'm affected by. So we're already choosing what we train ourselves in. It doesn't have to be some video game blank thing and then we get to choose what world we want to live in. That's just a very exaggerated way of kind of like basically letting narcissism do anything it wants. So it's a lot of power for baby mind. And there's going to be a lot of heartbreak with that and a lot of devastation. Too much power. Too much power, not ready. How can I tell this? This scholar, indigenous, aboriginal person, an Appalachian clan, Tyson Yonkaporta. I've been really interested in his work lately. I've read his book a few years ago, Sand Talk. And in it, he makes many, many, many profound, very kind of provocative comments. Sand Talk, Tyson Yonkaporta. And one thing he mentions is, what are the kinds of questions that are asked by an adolescent culture? By an immature culture? Question number 1, who am I? Number 2, what's my purpose? Number 3, what happens after I die? Why is this adolescent and immature? More mature cultures don't ask this question. Why? Because who am I? What's my purpose? What happens after I die? It's all about me. And mature cultures know there's a lot more going on in the world than just me. We happen to be in a mature culture like that. We're Bodhisattvayana. What's the main Bodhisattvayana question? What serves? What serves? How can I be of better service? This is such a deeply mature, such a profound question. How can I care for you more thoroughly? Because the recognition is the nature of my mind is naturally compassionate. It's naturally intelligent. It's naturally interconnected. If I serve you, it serves me. If I create a nourishing, flourishing situation, like I'm naturally like buoyed up and just fulfilled by that. This is the great Shantideva said that the root of every trouble is the thinking, what about me? And the cause of every happiness is thinking, what about you? And we've heard this so many times, and it's still true. It's such deep, heart-core Vajrayana. Bodhichitta, it's the beating heart. So if we use AI in the giant, big, blank, boundless room, and we say, how do I create a world that serves more beings? It's more educational, it's more heartfelt, it's more uplifting, it's more of service to whoever else shares that space, then fine, AI is going to be an amazing power tool for bodhisattva activity. And there'll be some beings that use it like that, just like TV. TV could be the best educational tool that ever existed. Radio, smartphone, it's all the same. The trajectory of going of that. Oral traditions, into written traditions, into radio, into TV, into internet, smartphone, now headset, embodied gear stuff. It's the power, we're accessing more and more power of interconnection. Technology is letting our mind have a bigger effect that's faster. But are we ready for that power? Because if the main driving question is, what about me? Me first. I'm so special, right? Again, this Tyson Yonkaporta says, what indigenous clans of all types, the fundamental question they've all circled around to prevent is the root thought, I'm more special. Ego clinging. Buddhism is one of these indigenous cultures, isn't it? Tibetan Buddhism goes back to the 8th century. Indian Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism goes back to the 600 or so BCE. This is definitely an indigenous culture. It's a very ancient wisdom tradition. So what do I want to populate this world with? We're already choosing that. Now we get a headset that really viscerally lets us see what choice we're making, and we get feedback that comes very fast. But if we think we're outside of a system of cause and effect, if we think space and time doesn't matter, So much of our body intelligence is about space and time. What is happening around me? What are the cues I get? The smells, the taste, the breeze, the texture, the light. Like, all this is me in space. And all this intelligence comes to locate interdependence in time and space. Right? The great master Nagarjuna is like, we only recognize the absolute through the relative, through the relational, through the relationality, the relationships, the connectivity of being an embodied, embedded mind and heart, and all this gushy, messy juiciness of humanhood, you know? And that's just human. There's insects and bugs and Gandharvas and all these different types of beings. Often I'm so human-centric. Again, we'll see what happens with that once these AI systems get much smarter than humans in terms of their computational ability. That's coming so fast now. High human IQ, this propositional belief structure knowledge, a high IQ for a human's 120. That's about a normal average. It's a high normal. Einstein had 160. The current ChatGPT 4 has 150. It went from 120-ish to 150 in about 6 months. If it's on the same trajectory, 6 months from now, it's going to be about what? 190? 6 months later, so a year from now, what, 320? What is it like when we're interacting with a system that has the double IQ of a human, of a normal human on the street? What are we going to... that's going to be like a squirrel interacting with a human, but we're the squirrel. And this program, whether it's sentient or not, we're not even going to understand it. That's what's coming in a year. This is right here, right now. So if we thought we were going to avoid this whole thing, we're not. It's here. Just this week, all these AI systems, Google, Microsoft, and all these things, they've already integrated AI in all the things they use now. You don't have to go to some separate thing. It's in the thing. You get Microsoft Word, AI is in it. You use phone programs, the AI is in it. There's not an escape. If you use electricity, it's here and now. So the question really that I'm circling around is how to be responsible in the web of connections that I'm in, that I'm a part of, that make me what I am. The relationships. How do I be accountable in that and responsible in that? Because that's what a very foundational Buddhist, Theravada, that's such a deep, deep question. How can I show up to my circumstances properly? For bodhisattvas, they just magnify that question like basically without limit. What serves now for all time and space, endlessly for every being until they're all free of suffering? It means like, how can I be most effective now to help Buddha nature turn on a little more brightly now? It's very intimate. It's very fertile and messy and very much about what is happening around me and in me right now. So there's some Dharma quotes around this. So here's Ajahn Chah, the great master Ajahn Chah, a book, Being Dharma. And I read this is so helpful. When planting, is page 118. When planting a tree, if you want to do it the right way and get fruit from it, how should you go about it in order to have a relaxed mind? You should do that which is your responsibility. Getting hold of the sapling is your job. Digging the hole is your job. Planting it, fertilizing it, and watering it, and keeping the insects off, it is your job. That's it. Stop there. How fast or slow it grows isn't your job. Let go of this part. You make the causes in planting and taking care of the tree, but you don't think, when will it be fully grown? When will there be fruit? That isn't your business. It's the plant's. If you think, I've watered it and all the rest, now how can I force it to grow faster? That won't help. It isn't your responsibility. But there's a connection. If you've done your work properly, the tree is bound to grow according to nature. If you think like this, you will be okay. If you want it to grow in a day or two after all your hard work, that's mistaken. There's no happiness that way. Don't think about it too much at this point. It's a matter of making causes. If the causes are good, the result is bound to be good, because all things are born of causes. We have our duties, so we do them to the full. but we act without attachment, taking care of our own responsibilities. If we try to take care of the tree's responsibilities, we will get upset. The important thing is to make the causes good. Then the result will be good. If we think like this, there will be a lightness of mind. Otherwise, we are doing others' work, watching the tree today, going back to watch it tomorrow, trying to see it grow. So Ajahn Chah goes on, but responsibility, accountability, knowing like what am I actually responsible for? What have I promised? What have I committed to? Where have I really said, I will go deep here. I will care for this. And like trying to do that as fully as possible, as intelligently as possible, as carefully, as full of care as possible. That's my responsibility. But I don't have control over the whole system. I don't get to choose all the features that populate an entire world that I'm a part of. That is very wishful thinking, and it's really toxic because I don't have the intelligence to make that choice. And there's no such being that has that. Omnipotence, the Buddha clearly taught, there's no such being as an omnipotent being. That doesn't exist. Even the Buddha wasn't omnipotent. He was omniscient. He knew the vast network of causes and conditions that were called relative truth. So knowing like what's my responsibility, what am I caring for, and how can I plant the proper causes and conditions to orient towards the result that I seek, which is the happiness of all beings, the enlightenment of all beings. So that's one kind of way to dip in. Then there's a lot of quotes. So this in another way is like kind of sometimes for people it's like trigger word, or it's just like a boring word or not interesting word. Renunciation mind. This is what we're talking about. How do I show up in my life actually fully and be responsible for what is on my plate? How do I take responsibility, accountability for like my mind, my own mind, for my mind? Not for the world or not for your mind, for my mind. Because I have the power to actually be responsible for my mind. Which is also interesting in the AI land. Maybe some people think, oh, what you do in there doesn't really matter. It's like a video game. You get together with your friends, you play a shooter game, you shoot each other, it's all fun and games. Then you stop and you're like in real world. But more and more, this is not going to be true. More and more, this is going to be the real world that people are in. And that's just normal, everyday, worldly perspective. The second thing is, from the Buddhist perspective, every instant you do something with your mind, it shapes the mind. Whether that's in a dream, waking, deep sleep, in a video game, watching a movie, writing something, reading something, the mind is being influenced. It's the superpower of the mind. It can influence and be influenced. So be careful what causes and conditions you put yourself in, because the mind will shape according to them. So there's a quote from Dudjom Tersar Ngondro Rinpoche. It's a Facebook thing he did in 2020. Some say the dark age, the age of vice, the Kali Yuga, is here now, or at least coming soon. What determines if an age is dark or golden? What are the symptoms or omens? Earthquakes, violet skies, meteoric activity? These are not the omens of doomsday as we are made to believe. Likewise, cherubs flying, a sound economy, freedom of information, peaceful times are also not necessarily times of a golden age. The age of light is said to be when people value empathy and forgiveness, when they have a willingness to see other people's view and are contented with what they have. When such values are systematically sabotaged, then you can say that the dawn of the doomsday has begun. When we look at a harmless beggar and see it as a pest, and envy billionaires who routinely destroy the earth, we are inviting doomsday to come. Again, another quote from Dudjom Tersar Rinpoche is on a recent talk he gave, Contemporary Buddhist Perspective on Myth, Language, Globalization, and Societal Values. This is in 2020. Dudjom Tersar Rinpoche said, if Buddhism boils down to don't eat meat, smile, be gentle, be kind, be helpful, behave well, then Buddhism is dead. I'm sure there will be a lot of good people walking around, but there will be no Buddhists. So the third quote, again, Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche, YouTube video 2020. We talk about how samsara is useless, samsara is suffering, all of that. But that's not the real reason for renunciation. The real reason for renunciation of samsara is because samsara is shunyata. It doesn't exist. There is no ignorance. There's also no end of ignorance. There is no death. There is no end of death. There are no Four Noble Truths. This was taught by the same guy who taught the Four Noble Truths. You need to know this. This is the brilliance of Shakyamuni Buddha. These are so deep. So not only is it about like being in relationality with responsibility and accountability, but understanding that if we really look closely enough at relationships, the relationality in my own mind, my own heart, my own body, with my own close ones and strangers and enemies and all beings, if I really look closely at that relationality, the relationship, the relative truth, I'll see that there's only relationship. I'll only ever find more vast, nuanced networks of relationality. There is no fixed thing happening. It's just a dynamic interplay of cause, condition, and effect. And in Buddhism, that's called wisdom, or prajna, insight. There is no fundamental thing there. Not outside, not inside, not in between. And that's really hard for most minds. It's definitely hard for my mind. Some people call that nowadays is kind of trending, liminality. Liminal, the in-between, the bardo. Tibetan Buddhism talked about the bardo, that all of this life and experience is a bardo. This is baked into Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana view. Bardo, in between, it's always shifting, changing. Everything's amorphous. There is no fixed final frame. And that's the fundamental uncertainty that each mind has to come to terms with in order for it not to keep suffering. This is all uncertain. Everything's constantly moving. And we say that, impermanence, impermanence, impermanence. But how much do we really believe that? Like, are we really willing to be with that level of uncertainty? Because when we're not, that's the root cause of samsara, of suffering. I want to be set, stable, in control, ego clinging. I do that so much, all the time. I'm not saying I'm out of that. I'm totally in that. That's why I can talk with it a little, like authentically a little. Suffering hurts. It really hurts. But if I look closely enough at suffering, the sufferer, right? This is where Buddhism takes the question of who am I? And it really opens that in a mature way. Who am I? There's no I there. There's no suffering there. If I really look closely. And then what do I find? I find connection, relationality. That's why the question of what serves is such a burning question for bodhisattvas. How can I help with these relationships? Like the relational network I'm a part of. Not how can I plug and play whatever I want to see around me and however I want to look. It's a doomed game. It's really, we'll see. We're at the very beginning, day 2. So we'll see where it goes. But Buddha Shakyamuni taught we're in an age of degeneration, where the narrowing of mind is definitely narrowing. And if we take narcissism, for example, and we always put me first as the most special, important center of the universe, and then I can do whatever I want with these power tools, and then everyone's trying to do that, we really will see that's not going to create a lot of harmonious collective togetherness. It's going to be a lot of conflict, or at least a whole lot of confusion. All right, one more quote. For right now, I'll wrap up. Going into this bodhicitta, or the like kind of burning heart of the bodhisattvayana, the bodhisattva path, those courageous for enlightenment, for all beings. And this is a quote of Venerable Khenpo Rinpoche from Illuminating the Path. This is the Dudjom Tersar Ngondro book. It's page 93. This is such a powerful, powerful quote, such a special book. Without bodhicitta, there are no Buddhas, bodhisattvas, or enlightenment. There's only confusion based on ego games and selfishness. If we do not have bodhicitta, we are not actually taking refuge, even if we go through the motions. Without it, our efforts are forced, uptight, and meaningless. With bodhicitta, we acquire skillful means. We become kind and gentle, and our practice becomes more powerful, beneficial, and beautiful. When Buddha Shakyamuni was alive, there was a famous king named Prasanajit who ruled much of northern India from his capital in Shravasti. He was very devoted to the Buddha, but did not have a lot of time to practice because of his worldly duties. His heart was with the Buddha, but he couldn't connect deeply with the Dharma. This worried him. So one day he asked the Buddha what to do. The Buddha said, if you can do only one practice, you will be applying yourself all the time. What would that be? Asked the king. It is generating bodhicitta, said the Buddha. Bring bodhicitta into each of your daily activities, whether you're standing, walking, sitting, or sleeping. While you're governing the kingdom or whatever you're doing, if you keep bodhicitta in your heart, it will transform all of your actions into the practice of the Dharma. Then again, from Illuminating the Path, page 96, Pacha Rinpoche also said that without bodhicitta, so this is the reverse side, so that was the sweet uplifting, this is the reverse, a little strong. Pacha Rinpoche also said that without bodhicitta firmly established in your heart, even if you've memorized the Dzogchen Tantras and can quote all the Mahamudra texts, you're merely paying lip service to the Dharma. He said that no matter how vast your view is, without bodhicitta, whatever you say is the doctrine of demons. He felt strongly about this, saying that people who talk about their experiences of bliss and emptiness in Vajrayana practice without having bodhicitta as a foundation should have their mouths stuffed with the garbage of 9 cities. Bodhicitta, right? That's the answer. And then the next little thing, quote, this is from B. Alan Wallace. In his book, Attention Revolution, page 150. We have 2 challenges that are at the heart of Dzogchen. Do not let the vision be buried by your life, by economics, politics, and so on. Do not let the vision get lost while you're caught up in what happens on a day-to-day basis. This is the first challenge. The second is, do not let your vision of the middle way, the vision of the great perfection, stifle your interest in day-to-day affairs, your life, your family, the political situation, among others. Do not let vision exclude life situations as if they did not matter, because they do. Keep in mind this expression, stillness in front of the movement. Stillness in front of the movement. So, how can I be accountable, responsible? How can I hold my feet to the fire? What does that even mean? How can I show up in my life in a way that actually cares about my life and it cares about the people around me? And I care about this continuing in a lovely way, and I care about the lineage, and I care about the teachings being preserved. How can I do that? I have to pay attention to them, but in a light way, in an open way, a spacious way. But it actually means I have to listen to them. I do have to listen to others. I have to listen to what's happening. I have to pay attention and slow down and wait. What's going on in the situation? What's going on in my mind? I have to patiently give myself the time and space to be with what is happening. Not to just make it however I want it, but to actually be with the world. Be in the world with it. Be with people as they are. But not get so tense around who they are and who I am and what's the relationship. Do it with a big view. This is just a moment we share. How can bring some buoyancy, brightness, loveliness to this little fleeting moment? This is becoming a memory as it happens, and it's a memory I'll soon forget. But it's still going to have an imprint on my mind and my heart. It's still going right into my Laia, the Buddha nature. And is it going to uncover it and make my Buddha nature shine more brightly? Or is it going to cover my Buddha nature and kind of wrap myself in more wounds and more scars and more kind of distorted, closed view perception? So time's at an end for this. This book is so sweet. A Flash of Lightning in the Dark of Night, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, with a commentary by His Holiness Dalai Lama. The translation of the Shantideva's Bodhicharya Avatara, the Bodhisattva Way of Life, is so beautiful. It's so beautiful in this book. So I wanted to read one. It's the translation is so beautiful. But this is His Holiness Dalai Lama speaking about bodhicitta. He's worked so hard at such a dire time for the Tibetan people for so many decades. And then quote, this is page 97. When people say that I have worked a lot for peace, I feel embarrassed. I feel like laughing. I don't think that I've done very much for world peace. It's just that my practice is the peaceful path of kindness, love, compassion, and not harming others. This has become part of me. It's not something for which I have specially volunteered. I'm simply a follower of the Buddha. And the Buddha taught that patience is the supreme means for transcending suffering. He said, if a monk harms others, he is not a monk. I am a Buddhist monk, so I try to practice accordingly. When people think this practice is something unique and special and call me a leader of world peace, I almost feel ashamed. A good heart is the source of all happiness and joy, and we can all be good-hearted if we make an effort. But better still is to have bodhicitta, which is a good heart imbued with wisdom. It is the strong desire to attain enlightenment in order to deliver all beings from suffering and bring them to Buddhahood. This thought of helping others is rooted in compassion, which grows from a feeling of gratitude and love for beings who are afflicted by suffering. Traditionally, there are two methods for developing this sort of care and gratitude. One is to reflect on the fact that all beings have at some time in the succession of their lives been our parents, or at least close friends, so that we naturally feel grateful to them and wish to take on their suffering in exchange for our happiness. The other method is to understand that others suffer in the same way as we do, to see that we are all equal, and to reflect on what is wrong with egotism and on the advantages of altruism. We can use whichever of these two methods suits us best, or practice them both together. So this is equalizing, exchanging, and eventually seeing others as more important. This is so core of the way of the Bodhisattva. So when we get in our AI simulation, which is definitely coming, if you think you're going to be one of the people in the public sphere who doesn't have a headset on, engaging with this a couple years from now, just recognize if you're one of the people now who doesn't have a smartphone in your hand all the time when you're with people. We happen to be at a hermitage place where that's kind of rare here because Wi-Fi is bad. And we intentionally keep it bad. What happens when you just can't do whatever you want? You have to actually slow down and show up to what's happening around me already? How can I listen and tune into what's actually around me? And not just change it the way I want to change it. I use the internet all the time. I'm sure I'll try out the headset thing. If we can use this to creatively co-create beautiful, uplifted, mutually, reciprocally, just nourishing bodhicitta-full contexts, containers, worlds, communications, art, technological innovations, I'm totally for it. That's the very positive side of this time. If you have bodhisattvas using this kind of thing, the outreaching bodhicitta activity is enhanced. But if it's just selfishness that's empowered to do what it wants more, that's the kind of opaque, narrow side of the power of this kind of interconnectivity. So then holding my own feet to the fire, I actually have to pay attention to the relations that I'm a part of, because that's actually where I have so much power to be influenced by them and to influence, to really learn. And then what's this part? By joyfully, choosing or embracing voluntary simplicity, I have to choose to go deep here. None of us can go do everything we want all the time. We have to actually grow some roots somewhere if we want to go deep. That's voluntary simplicity. We choose, consciously choose, to care for something, a relationship, a quality of mind, a practice, a lineage. We're choosing to grow it, to really care for it, and we can't force it to grow fast. It'll do what it does. It's a vast web of cause, condition, and effect. But we can definitely take responsibility for our part in that, our loving touch of being embodied in touch with living systems that we're a part of right now. So thank you all. That's kind of, to some degree, a plea, and then also, to some degree, just a beautiful kind of pause to reconnect to these core essential teachings of the Buddha. And now we'll kind of go in this very incubator context of the Dudjom Tersar Ngondro, where we get to hold ourselves accountable to this lineage system that's just designed for us to brighten all of our Buddha nature activities and qualities. So really, genuinely thank you. And thanks for kind of this opportunity to practice together these sacred sublime teachings. Can I say a final little wrap up? That's great. Thank you. Thank you all. Isn't it just so tender to be us? I find it very tender to be a human being, and at this time too, but just now. It's just a tender thing. And I think part of why it's this part of the specialness of it is it's just really vulnerable. It's vulnerable to be in a body with a mind that's so sensitive. It has so much capacity to tune in to what's happening around, outside, inside. It's so sensitive. And it's that vulnerability, the sensitivity, like that's actually kind of where we recognize we're a part of something so much bigger than ourselves. Like we're deeply connected with this living world and all these living peace people and relationships. And when we like kind of recognize that like the power or the kind of like the beauty of it is like it's in the kind of connecting and in the interweaving. That's actually where like kind of the Dharma, I think, kind of really is alive. And so as Dharma people, as Buddhists, we also have these living ecologies that we're a part of. And they're lineage ecologies. And that's part of the power and beauty and strength of practitioners. We have the support of all these lineage structures. And there's a beautiful quote by Ling Rinpoche. It's a short quote, and it's really powerful, impactful for me. It's in his book, Ruby Rosary, Ling Rinpoche, and it says, page 230, "For those of us who presume to be followers of the Buddha, if we can each perfect our learning and contemplation within a particular jhana that corresponds to our individual faculties and inclinations, with its own threefold system of basis, path, and result, then even though it may seem as if we've not served the Buddha's teachings in vast ways, in fact, it is the most beneficial in not allowing the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni to be contradicted or ruined from within." So whatever corner of reality of the world that we happen to be in, wherever our home is, wherever our body is, if we can care for it on like how it is in relationship to what it's a part of, and in this living context of a lineage, if we can, within a jhana, if we can like stay with a view, meditation, conduct, and fruition of that specific jhana, and not break it, to actually show up on the terms of what the living system is that we're a part of, then that's the doorway to liberation. But if we aren't vulnerable, and instead we try to just only control our situation, or kind of overstep the boundaries of like what a living ecology actually takes to continue, if we're kind of reckless in that, then it won't sustain. It's actually in the surrendering to like the living system that we're a part of, that's actually where we get to be connected with everything that exists. And like that's kind of the doorway into emptiness or interdependence. So thank you. We're deeply ecological beings, like in every way we look at it. And so thanks for being a part of this living system. So happy.